The modern battlefield is no longer just tanks and warships. Today, the true front lines are often invisible, woven into the fabric of our global economy and digital networks. The tools of power have evolved, and so have the arenas in which nations compete. It's global supply chains that stretch across continents, financial markets that react in real time to the slightest tremor, and energy pipelines that fuel entire economies. The movement of goods, the flow of capital, and the steady supply of energy are now as critical to national security as any weapon system. Wars today are decided by economic resilience, strategic alliances, and secure access to resources, not just military might. The ability to withstand shocks, whether from sanctions, cyber attacks, or supply disruptions, can determine a nation's fate. Alliances, too, are no longer just military pacts. They are networks of trade, technology, and shared interests that can tip the balance of power. The US-China rivalry is already playing out on these less visible fronts, where economic statecraft and resource security are the primary weapons. Each side maneuvers for influence, using tariffs, investment, and technology restrictions as tools of competition. The contest is as much about who controls the flow of rare minerals and advanced semiconductors as it is about military hardware. In a world of interdependence, a tariff in Washington can ripple across continents, disrupting industries and livelihoods far beyond US borders. An energy deal in Beijing can shift global power dynamics overnight, redrawing alliances and altering the balance of influence in entire regions. Every economic decision is a move on a global chessboard. Asking who would win a war is the wrong question. The real issue is which nation is better equipped to navigate this complex, interconnected world. Success depends on adaptability, innovation, and the ability to build coalitions that can weather economic storms and technological disruptions. When we look at trade disputes, shifting alliances, and the evolving energy map, a new reality emerges. The future of conflict is not just about armies and navies, but about who can shape the rules of the global system, secure vital resources, and maintain the trust of partners and allies. Despite its military strength, the US would face significant disadvantages in a prolonged, multi-front conflict with a strategically savvy and economically integrated China. The outcome would hinge not just on firepower but on economic endurance, technological leadership, and the ability to adapt to a rapidly changing world order. The US-China trade war exposed the limits of American unilateral power. For decades, the United States had grown accustomed to shaping global economic rules and expecting other nations to follow its lead. But when tensions with China escalated into a full-blown trade conflict, the world witnessed a dramatic shift in the balance of power. The US imposed massive tariffs, expecting China to fold, but Beijing retaliated with its own tariffs and critical mineral restrictions. These measures targeted key American industries from agriculture to technology, and sent shockwaves through global supply chains. Suddenly, the assumption that economic pressure alone could force a rival to back down no longer held true. The standoff quickly forced the US to retreat, rolling back tariffs in a tacit admission of failure. Markets reacted with volatility, and American businesses lobbied for relief as costs soared and uncertainty mounted. The White House, once confident in its strategy, found itself scrambling to contain the fallout. The episode revealed that economic warfare in an interconnected world is rarely one-sided. Globalization had woven the US and China together so tightly that any attempt to punish one side inevitably hurt the other. Economists and policymakers around the world took note, realizing that the old playbook of economic coercion was no longer effective in a world defined by mutual dependence. Both economies suffered, and the US strategy of escalation proved ineffective. American farmers lost access to crucial export markets, while Chinese manufacturers faced shrinking orders and layoffs. The pain was shared, and neither side emerged unscathed. The temporary truce did little to resolve underlying issues, leaving supply chains disrupted and uncertainty high. Businesses struggled to adapt, and consumers faced higher prices and fewer choices. The sense of instability lingered long after the headlines faded. America's belief in its ability to dictate outcomes was shattered. The trade war became a cautionary tale, showing that even the world's largest economy could not bend global realities to its will. The trade war exposed the new reality: interdependence creates mutual vulnerability and blunts old coercive tactics. In this new era, economic strength is measured not just by size, but by resilience and adaptability. Instead of a show of strength, it highlighted the limits of American power. The world had changed, and so too had the rules of engagement. America's aggressive trade policies have backfired, inflicting economic pain at home. Tariffs on intermediate goods raise production costs, hurting U.S. businesses and fueling inflation. The uncertainty from erratic trade policy has stifled investment and innovation, especially in critical sectors. Companies unsure of future rules have delayed or canceled projects, weakening long-term growth. The brief de-escalation offered no real stability. Businesses remain paralyzed by uncertainty. Economic resilience is crucial in modern conflict, but the U.S. has undermined its own foundation. By destabilizing its economy, America has made itself more vulnerable in any sustained rivalry with China. The cost of miscalculation is a weakened position on the global stage. The trade war's biggest casualty may be American credibility. The U.S., once seen as a reliable leader, was forced into a public retreat after China stood firm. This exposed the limits of threat-based diplomacy and emboldened adversaries while unsettling allies. The world has learned that standing up to U.S. pressure can work, especially for peer competitors. America's ability to build coalitions and shape global norms has been weakened. The rollback wasn't just tactical, it was a strategic setback. In a multipolar world, the U.S. now looks less like an indispensable leader and more like a fallible giant. The perception of American strength has been fundamentally shaken. Alliances are a force multiplier, but America's recent unilateralism has strained its closest partnerships. Key allies targeted by U.S. tariffs and unpredictable policies have grown wary and distanced themselves. Instead of uniting against China, many have pursued their own trade agreements, often excluding the U.S. This strategic realignment reduces American leverage and influence. In a conflict with China, the U.S. would need unprecedented cooperation, but years of neglect have eroded trust. Treating allies as transactional partners has squandered a major advantage. China, with few military allies, has benefited from America's missteps. By damaging vital relationships, the U.S. has weakened its own strategic position. The global energy market, once dominated by the United States for decades, is undergoing a dramatic transformation. Today, China's growing influence is reshaping the very foundations of how energy is traded, priced, and controlled around the world. The old order, where American interests set the tone, is giving way to a new era defined by shifting alliances and emerging powers. As the world's largest oil importer, China now has the power to sway global markets. Its decisions on when and how much to buy can set prices, dictate the direction of oil flows, and even influence the economic stability of entire regions. This growing clout has sharply limited U.S. leverage, making it harder for Washington to use energy as a tool of foreign policy. State-owned oil giants and alliances like OPEC+ are increasingly prioritizing their own interests, often aligning with China and other rising powers. These groups are less willing to bend to Washington's demands, instead focusing on maximizing their own profits and geopolitical influence. Meanwhile, America's once vast energy reserves are being depleted. Oil fields that once fueled the nation's rise are now running dry, and many rigs sit idle. This leaves the U.S. increasingly vulnerable to future supply shocks and price spikes, with fewer options to cushion the blow. In the event of a major conflict, securing enough fuel for both the military and the broader economy would become a daunting challenge for the United States. The ability to project power and maintain economic stability would be directly threatened by energy shortages. China, on the other hand, has methodically secured its energy future. Through long-term contracts, massive investments in infrastructure, and strategic partnerships with key suppliers in the Middle East, Africa, and Russia, China has built a resilient and diversified energy network that insulates it from many global shocks. As a result, the United States now finds its global influence waning and its energy security increasingly compromised. The era of American energy dominance is fading, replaced by uncertainty and new vulnerabilities. In this new reality, the U.S. faces a profound disadvantage in any long-term confrontation, one where energy security could determine the outcome of global power struggles for years to come. China has played a masterful game of energy diplomacy, diversifying suppliers and insulating itself from pressure. After Russia's invasion of Ukraine, China bought discounted Russian oil, strengthening ties and stabilizing a key partner. It used this opportunity to build strategic reserves and expand its influence in Asian energy markets. In the Middle East, China brokered peace between Saudi Arabia and Iran, securing stable supplies from both. Beijing's pragmatic, economics-first approach contrasts sharply with America's entanglements. China's diverse energy portfolio is resilient and hard to disrupt. In a conflict, this network would give China a critical advantage over the US. Long-term, China's energy strategy showcases strategic foresight and patience. The nature of global power has changed. Economic interdependence, alliances, and resource control now decide outcomes. The US can no longer count on victory against a peer like China. Trade wars, alienated allies, and energy shifts have eroded American dominance. China's patient diplomacy and economic strategy have built resilience and influence. The US, meanwhile, has weakened its own position through miscalculation and neglect. Modern conflicts are won by those who master trade, diplomacy, and resource management, not just military might. On these new battlefields, the US is increasingly outmaneuvered.